So a couple of days ago, I watched the brand new Two Kaiser X Gokaiger TTFC special, and it was pretty good. I actually liked it a lot. There were some weird parts about it that I wasn't exactly expecting when I kind of just, breezed through it for certain clips and was freaking out about the Gokai Cellular Squeaker Unit adapter thing. But now that I've actually sat down and watched it, I wanted to go ahead and give my thoughts about it here today because I'm still just kind of blown away that the special even exists as it is. And so I want to talk about my thoughts about it. So first of all, I'm going to kind of summarize the special a little bit. So it's actually longer than I thought it was going to be. It's basically like the length of a typical Sentai episode. It was like 24 minutes long or so like that, which I was kind of not expecting because sometimes TTFC specials, especially if they are multi-parters, can be a little short. One special that comes to mind with that is the Genmu and Thouser specials. Those were like 8-minute episodes, or some of them are kind of short, so I wasn't exactly knowing what to expect with the length on this episode. Basically, it's definitely much more of a Zenkaiger themed thing. Obviously, Zox and Flint are kind of the main characters, but I think they do a really good job of not only making this a fun little story for them, but also really making the Gokaigers be involved in a way that feels pretty natural. So even though the monster is extremely weird and not what I was expecting whatsoever, but basically also this picks up sometime after the Zenkaiger versus Kiramager versus Senpaiger movie, so it is sort of, it is referenced a little bit, but it doesn't seem like it's something. Now, personally, I haven't seen that movie yet. I've been waiting for that to be subbed by different subgroups and fan subs and stuff like that. So I don't exactly know how much Zox and Marvelous and Flint and everybody interact in that film. Clearly, and we also knew this from the production photos and everything and the press photos, that there is some level of interaction with those characters in that movie, but the special doesn't really make it too crazy in terms of, the only question I really have in terms of connections to that movie is, I don't know if that movie kind of explains why the Gokaigers are still kind of hanging around on Earth. They kind of were doing that at the end of Ten Gokaiger, and as far as we're aware, both the movie appearance and the special take place after Ten Gokaiger, which actually, speaking of that kind of just in real world stuff, it does appear that this special, and maybe their cameo in Senpaiger, but maybe not with that, but at least this special was seemingly filmed around the time of Ten Gokaiger, which would make a lot of sense due to the fact that, of course, Zenkaiger would have still been the current Sentai, so it would not have been hard to get Zox and Flint as actors, and of course it also would not have been hard to get Ayam and Guy for this film, or this little special, when they were right there to film the film. So, but like I said, I don't exactly know the connection of why the Gokaigers are just kind of chilling around, but you can kind of either there's an explanation in the movie, or there's kind of just an inference that they're kind of just hanging around. Their galleon doesn't exist anymore, the galleon got destroyed, so they're kind of stuck here anyway, I suppose, if that is kind of the case. But just kind of something interesting, because Marvelous just shows up into the special. But I'm kind of just jumping all over the place here. The special begins on Zox and Flint's ship, which we get to see Flint has been proposed to and is going to be marrying Doetamu, which is a Tanuki-themed monster, which I thought was kind of a brand new monster design when I first saw it. It actually isn't. It's kind of just a kitbash of different monster suit pieces, primarily being used of a monster from Lupat, which is the vast majority of the body, with an actual repainted head from Hound Shadow from one of the from the Tokyuger movie, I believe, actually. So that's kind of an obscure one to kind of grab some pieces from, but it's interesting to see it here in this special. I think the only big thing that they changed about the body is he has a tie now. So we already see this focus on this ring that Flint is wearing, and it's already pretty clear that she's not actually in love with this monster, that it's all some kind of big plot, it's some kind of mind control ring, which we definitely see is the focus later on. And we kind of have this fun little sequence where the monster's kind of trying to prove himself worthy of marrying Flint to both Zox and Katsunara and Ricky, and it's just not really going so well, but eventually Zox is just kind of I guess if she's happy, we'll go with it, right? So, which is already a weird premise as it is, but it definitely gets a lot weirder the more we get people involved here. So basically Marvelous kind of shows up and is like, oh, hey, you guys are dealing with that too? Well, we've sent an informant in to kind of deal with it because Ayam has actually been captured by this as well. And there's a fun little sequence where we get to see sort of the rest of the Gokaigers, but it's obvious that Joe and Luca aren't actually in this special. We just have two people standing next to Marvelous wearing their clothes, which is supposed to just kind of give the impression of hey, they're here. Not really anybody standing in for Dawn that much. So technically you could say that Gokai Blue and Yellow appear in this, sort of, but it's just kind of a fake out there. Only half of the actual Gokaiger team make appearances. But basically, since Ayam is captured, Guy was sent out to kind of track down the monster, and then since he failed at that, they ended up using him as bait, dressed up as Luca, to kind of infiltrate this whole base and figure out what's going on. And when we get there, we get this interesting scene where we see that the monster's whole deal, this Tanuki's deal, is that he's capturing a bunch of female pirates so they can beat him up because he gets pleasure from pain. Yeah, it's weird. I'm not a big fan of that monster plot, for sure. I definitely like a focus on, like, Iam and Flint getting to kick some butt here, but, like, that's weird, definitely. But pretty much the rest of the special is Guy breaks the control of the rings. We get Gokai Pink rescuing kind of the other female pirates that are there. And then Flint is kind of just doing her own thing with like the revolver that we've seen her have in Zenkaiger. And of course that's not really working too much on this monster. In fact, he likes it, which, but besides that, she doesn't have a means to transform just yet, which is kind of, we're not really sure exactly where this takes place in terms of relation to the stage show of the Tukai Flint suit. There's reason to believe that that could potentially take place after this, which we'll get to in a second. But basically, there's a fight outside between just these generic goons and Gokai Red and Two Kaiser out there, which is a really fun fight. And then I already talked about this in kind of my older videos, talking about the Tweaker unit when it got announced, when we saw that the special was a thing. And basically, in my kind of spoiler part of that, I talked about how there's a whole sequence where Marvelous asks for Two Kaiser's power, Zox takes the Sentai gear out of the Gear Delaner and throws it to Marvelous, and it becomes the Two Kaiser Ranger Key, which is really cool. And then he puts it in the buckle, which then transfers it over to Guy, which is really cool because there's connections to how that would work in Gokaiger, because we know that the buckle is like this mystical kind of magical dimensional thing that can transport Ranger keys from the chest to other Gokaigers, so it makes sense that you can transport the keys to other Gokaigers. And then we have Guy showing up here giving the Gokai Cellular with the Tweaker units to Flint, and of course she becomes Two Kaiser, and then her and Gokai Pink finish off this really creepy Tanuki monster. Now what's also interesting about this too is that when this happens, Iam gives Flint her Gokai Saber, so that way she has a weapon to fight with, because Zox still has the Gear Delaner, so Flint doesn't actually have like a main weapon to fight along with, which is really cool that they like thought of that and gave her a Gokaiger weapon. However, what's really interesting is she uses the Two Kaiser Ranger Key to like initiate a final wave attack. However, it's not like a typical final wave attack. It is actually like a Tsukai final wave. It's like a mixture of like the Two Kaiser and final wave stuff, which the Gokai Saber clearly can't do because the Gokai Saber didn't exist with Two Kaiser in mind, 10 years before it existed. So that kind of begs the question of maybe they're going to consider some memorial weapons that would be able to like have that accurate sound, because as of right now there's no way to get that accurate sound from this special, which doesn't really matter. It's just like a fun little attack thing, but it is interesting that they bothered to make that a little bit different. It was still cool just to see, regardless anyway. But anyway, at the end of the special is pretty much at that point, so basically they decide to, they've kind of blown up this whole Tanuki's mansion and stuff like that. The other pirates have escaped, so Marvelous and Zox are like, alright, we're gonna go steal all his treasure, and Guy's like, no, Super Sentai members shouldn't do that, which is just funny, and they're just like, oh no, who cares, we're pirates, and so they just go off and do it anyway. And that's basically the special, except for Flint does mention how maybe she will create a transformation set of powers for herself that is going to be, I'm assuming, separate from Two Kaiser, so it's hard to say if that is supposed to be kind of a lead-in or a teaser to the final stage where she gets Tukai Flint. Maybe not, because in that stage show, she makes the gear as like a power-up for Zox, and then she accidentally gets hit with it and transforms into Tukai Flint, so it didn't seem intentional for it to be designed for her. So either that's sort of what they're leaning into, or maybe they're leaning into her coming back in some other special, or maybe like in a Dawn Brothers versus Zenkaiger or something like that, where we could see her in her own suit, or maybe she just makes a way to have her always be able to access the female Two Kaiser or something like that. But I'd like to see if that goes anywhere, and I'm hoping it's not just kind of a throwaway line at the end of this little special. But that's pretty much it. It's definitely a very fun time. It's just really great to see Zox and Flint interact with the Gokaigers, and it's also, even though we don't get the whole team back, it's just awesome to see the Gokaigers back in some capacity. It's also interesting because I'm not really used to Gokaigers appearing in something and not doing any Gokai changes, because nobody does actually, like in this special at all. Everybody is just Gokai Red, Gokai Silver, Gokai Pink. There's no gold mode, there's no like armor from the Ten Gokaiger film. There is technically a Gokai change, but it's just Flint becoming a female Two Kaiser, which is basically a Gokai change because it gender bends the suit around, which is kind of what Gokaiger would do with that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just a fun special. Like it's just like I said, it's a fun time. So as a Gokaiger fan and as a Zenkaiger fan, and especially a Zox and Flint fan, I love what they did with those characters in the show. I love how they were inspired by the Gokaigers, and I love that they finally were able to make some kind of special, and also that movie appearance, which I cannot wait to see their interactions in the movie, because that should be kind of their you know, chronologically, that should be like their first interactions because they already kind of know each other here and everything like that. So I just love that they actually made that happen, because when you made Two Kaiser look so much like Go-Kai Red, everybody would have wanted to see them interact, and they actually pulled it off not once, but twice, which is fantastic and a lot more than I ever could have asked for. So I just thank Toei for being able to make that happen, because it's really cool. So weird monster plot aside, I definitely recommend the Two Kaiser X Gokaiger special. I'm not going to say where I watched it, but if you know where to find Toku stuff, you know where to find it. So that's all I'm going to say on that front, but I definitely recommend it, like I said earlier, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts about it down in the comments below. Did you check it out? Do you plan on checking it out? Or are you going to wait for the Senpaiji movie to come out to get maybe just a little bit more context of Zox Flint meeting Go-Kai Red and everything like that, even though Marvelous is the only Gokaiger in that film. And it's also just fun to get more Gokaiger content in 2022. It gave us brand new Ranger keys out of it, and that's always a win in my book. So I'll take more of that any day. I would love to get like sequels to this. I would love an entire show of this, to be honest. But like I said, love to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments below. And would you do anything different with this special? Would you have made it longer? Would you have made it more than one part? Because this is one of those rare occasions where a TTFC special is just one-off and not like a 2-week thing or a multi-parter of some sort. Or maybe they will be. Maybe there will be some kind of implication to what Flint says about making her own transformation device. I guess time will tell. But like I said, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, and until next time, you guys can follow me on Twitter at LadyRangerKey or at LadyVicPR, and I'll see you all next time.